Two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am your host for tonight, and today we are going to be continuing Kimberly's birthday films, and apparently
Woohoo!
we are not done enjoying hell yet. So we have we have decided as a group to discuss
Hellraiser II,
Hellraiser
Hellbound.
from 1988, this time directed by Tony Randel and written as a screenplay by Peter Atkins. So let me give a small synopsis here of the film, as IMDb tells us. Kirsty is brought to an institution after the death of her family, where the occult-obsessed head resurrects Julie and unleashes the Cenobites once again.
At the Chenard Institute.
There
Dr.
will be
Chenard is-
spoilers.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Probably should have said it the first time too, but
if you don't know us by now, we will spoil the heck out of this movie. So, in any case, Kim, once again, why don't you tell us what were your thoughts of this particular second sequel?
Well, I saw this obviously after the first one, and I was still rather young when I saw it. I want to say it was probably like 1988, 1989 when I did see it. I did not see it in the theater because there's no way I would have been able to be allowed in the theater to see that. I think I saw Hellbound either on TV like HBO or Cinemax, or I saw it when we rented on tape. I can't remember, but I know I saw this movie more than I saw the first one growing up, because the second one was always either on cable TV or we rented it or we owned it. I just can't remember how we saw it a lot. But I remember looking at the second one and seeing certain gaps and thinking there's something that they're leaving out of the story. As the first one was much more cohesive, it made sense, but there were so many aspects of the second movie that even as a kid, I'm like, okay, this is not making sense. This is not making sense. And as I got older and became an adult, I was like, okay, this shit really isn't making sense. So even though visually the second one looks better, story-wise, it left a lot of questions. And there were a lot of plot holes for me, so...
Okay. What about you, Brandon? What were your thoughts on this second film to the
I
series?
mean, my first time watching this one was not long after watching actually no, it was a good long time after watching the first one. I had only the first one in my collection for a long time. Then I got this other collection that had all of the what were those angel movies? God, what were they called? It was the one with the fallen angels that were destroying
Prophecy.
the prophecy, all the prophecy movies, and Hellraiser 3 through basically all the rest of the Hellraiser movies except for the remake.
To Hell World, at least.
And I was like, well, I'm missing one. So I had to go find it. And I'll admit, I didn't watch any of the other sequels until Kim and I actually got together, and then we kind of marathoned them. But the second one I did see because I'd gotten it used from Movie Stop, which was a great store, and I'm really sad at its passing.
Oh, I miss Movie Stop. Oh my god.
But I got a fairly good edition of the sequel, and I popped it in, and I actually enjoyed the sequel a little bit more. I felt like there were some plot holes that were filled for me, like, where the Cenobites came from. I really liked the villain.
Yeah.
He was so cool.
of
I
this
love
one.
the villain in this movie.
Me too.
A lot, and so it had a lot more there, and of course, I always hear the opening theme to it
That's because
as
it's my
I
go to sleep movie.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
So
let's explain this right quick. So for whatever reason, this movie became when we moved to our current house, when we bought our current house, Hellbound Hellraiser 2 became my go to sleep movie. And so I don't know, maybe because I don't know. It just became my go to sleep movie. So that was a movie we played all the time until I conked out, and Brandon would go to sleep to that opening theme song.
I could probably quote every line from like the first 10 minutes of that movie, where he's like,
Damn.
Jesus wept. And just where they tear him apart at the end of the first movie, but it's recap. That entire recap I've got memorized. It's so I will always have that in my head. But I had a fairly good first impression of it when we watched it this time. It had been a while since I had seen it the entire way through, so it was kind of cool watching it all the way through again and not kind of falling asleep through the first half hour. It's sort of like Grave Encounters. We do that as well, and I don't think I've seen Grave Encounters 2 all the way to the end for a long time.
Okay.
Okay. How about you, Dustin? When did you first see this film?
Well, so kind of going back to when I saw the first Hellraiser, it was when I was starting to explore horror, and there was some guy who taught fencing classes at my undergrad school that was friends with one of my friends, and we were talking about horror movies, and they said that the Hellraiser series was good, but only the first two. So I was told to watch the first two and then pretend the rest of them didn't exist. And so I saw this. I saw Hellbound shortly after I saw the first movie, and at the time I wasn't. I was kind of. I think I was distracted or I had something going on, so I didn't really give it much attention or. Well, really any credit. So I didn't really have much of an opinion of it the first time I saw it. But then after I saw it again on the last drive-in with Joe Bob Briggs. And I really gained a greater appreciation for it, especially after I started paying better attention to it. So I think I've seen this movie about a half dozen times at this point. And I really enjoy it. Like, it has such like an amazing villain, and it really does a great job of expanding on the concepts that we were introduced to in Hellraiser. So it's like in Hellraiser we get the premise, and then Hellbound takes the next step in establishing its world building, and I think it's probably one of the best horror sequels out there.
I myself. This was another one that I had watched like 10 years ago or ish when I first was starting to get back into collecting some movies after a lot of my movies were stolen from me. I ended up coming across the Anchor Bay Hellraiser set, and of course the 3 through Hell Worlds set, and of course, the various sequels after those as well. It just became a kind of collector of the films, and we just watched them as we go. And I think the first time I actually picked it back up was when I ended up buying from a certain seller that I know the 2 singular Arrow films. It's the same damn things in the Scarlet set, so I decided, what the hell, I don't really need the third one on Arrow. It's fine the way it is, but
the third one turned out to be pretty okay. I saw that earlier today for the first time.
I didn't watch that again. I didn't pull it out, but I did watch the first 2 with it. I watched them. What was it? Like 3 weeks ago, and then I watched them again like earlier today. So seeing them again, and then I watched the behind the scenes of them 3 weeks ago, so that was really cool. Seeing how they did the effects behind the floor stuff, and then some of the stuff that they did behind this movie was kind of cool. But as far as my thoughts on this particular film, I thought it was it was definitely a unique sequel. I mean, I always like the whenever they do something in an asylum. I don't know why. Why it's just creepy and. I mean, they do it in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. I mean, they do it in what is it? They do it in the second season of American Horror Story.
Oh, that was excellent until the aliens got involved.
Yeah, I know that was weird. I think the asylum scenes are interesting because it is particularly what Americans view as an asylum. You know, you see this whole idea of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, you know, and what you would normally be faced with in reality is something completely different.
Yeah.
You don't have these like wards of people all sleeping in the same room. You don't have an entire floor of people where they're just locked in the cell in a padded room with, you know, in a straitjacket 24/7, you know.
It
maybe
depends
for a few hours.
on the hospital and the year.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about nowadays, babe.
Well, I mean,
nowadays, certainly. Well, but
I'll give you an example,
Brandon, babe, you would be more. You would know better than any of us. You know how mental hospitals today would look like.
I mean, I'll give you a good example.
Because your job, by the way. It's your job.
Actually, Dane. Cherry, which was the state hospital, one of the state hospitals in North Carolina. They would do stuff similar to that. Have multiple people around. Yeah. They would rotate beds. They would actually psychologically torture a lot of the people, and they were doing this up until the mid 2000s, and then they closed it.
Well, that's what I was gonna say there. Well, okay. So first of all, said I saw this film for the first time just before we started the first episode. And I have to say, well, I like the first one, but I have to say this one I liked significantly more because I felt like the first one, it did take a while to get going really into the mythology of it. And so with that all established in the more or less like enough to get us started in the first one, once we get here, then we're able to really dive into the mythology a lot more. And we're able to get a really compelling human villain whose motivations and his practices as in the human world that they mirror what he will become in the Cenobites realm. I don't know, do we call that hell or I don't even know what it is, but
it's hell.
Okay, well we'll call it hell then. But his actions and his the world that he has set up, he has created his own hell on earth, in which he is the devil basically, and he has control. And and that speaks to the fact that it is funny because you remember Tom Cruise's big anti-psychiatry rant on the Today Show, which that was back when Matt Lauer was Mr. Trustworthy, which Maya, the tables turned. But the thing is, like, the Church of Scientology's view on psychology and psychiatry and drugs and all that, it's extreme the other way. But what he was saying about the history of psychiatry and mental hospitals and stuff, certainly for quite a long time, he's not wrong. That mental hospitals and that field, they were quite medieval for a long time. And especially like the ones that were a little bit more removed from conventional society, where they just basically chucked the person in a hole, like Brandon said, they remain that way for well past the time that they should have. And so today, the what constitutes a mental hospital is far tamer than what you saw in this film, or even in something like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is a little bit more a conventional portrayal of what that.
What I call a mental hospital is the public school systems. So
Well, that's its own kettle of fish. But the point is that I think that for quite a long time that was more representative of what mental hospitals were rather than not, because the tools that they were using to fight these things were so crude and medieval that it's no surprise why someone like a Tom Cruise or an L. Ron Hubbard, who he did use his own techniques that were very much in line with what the psychologists were using at the time. So he's not above it. But the point is, like, there's a reason why one might be horrified by that sort of thing, because it was medieval for quite a long time. We obviously come a long way since then, but this is a person who clearly revels in the medieval side of it and in the ability to control and possess and torture.
Well, can we talk about the contrast between Dr. Chenard and Frank? Because they're two totally different people, but they're both searching the limit configuration and that other dimension for their own reasons. With Frank, it's all about pleasure, and it's about enjoying life. But with Dr. Chenard, it's almost about because he says to Julia, like, I have to see, I have to know. With Dr. Chenard, it's about knowledge. Like, it's about seeing these other dimensions.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it like this. It sounds so elitist and so snobby, but I almost find Dr. Chenard's motivations to be a bit more acceptable than Frank's.
Well, he's doing
I
it.
agree, actually, especially as a biology person.
Well, he thinks it's for the greater good, but it's more or less for his own personal enrichment.
It's for his own gratification.
Frank's was the ultimate pleasure. This was the ultimate knowledge, but maybe the ultimate knowledge of what he's never experienced.
Well, there's a duality to the Doctor that is not explored as much. I mean, the Doctor is actually almost every bit as nasty as Frank.
Yeah.
But one, he's got a cool, controlled nature on the outside. And his is more rooted in sadism than it is in the other.
He's also
that's there.
He's also in a position of power. As being head doctor of this mental ward, and plus he's got this like basement of all these like top 10 crazies.
One of the plot holes that bothered me as a child, that still bothers me to this day, is that just like when they hinted in the first movie that Frank may have molested Kirsty, in the second movie it's hinted that Dr. Chenard killed Tiffany's mom so that he could take control and take custody of Tiffany, because it seems like Tiffany's mom went to Dr. Chenard for help for Tiffany because, like she said, these puzzles are consuming her life. Well, Dr. Chenard later on used Tiffany as a conduit to solve the lament configuration. For whatever reason, he felt like he couldn't do it. I guess, he just felt like he didn't have the skills, but she did. And so she solves it, not knowing what the fuck it is, not having any motivation beyond curiosity of like, okay, what's this? I guess I'll solve it. And which is weird that the Cenobites did not take her like they would everyone else.
Well, they said that it was not hands that called them; it was desire.
They knew it was Chenard using her to open the boxes, and I actually caught that on this viewing. I think you're right. I think Chenard did kill Tiffany's mom so that he could have her for the puzzle boxes. He's clearly been studying them for a very long time.
Exactly.
3 of them, for fuck's sake.
I think that's one of the things that I like about the Cenobites is when they appear, they question. Well, at least the lead one, Pinhead. He questions the reason why the box was opened.
Yeah.
To begin with, and he ponders out loud. He doesn't exactly know why, but he's got a sense of extrasensory perception, and he reads people very well. You know,
Well, and he's not above reason and negotiation and fairness and that kind of stuff. So I mean, that's the thing. They're harsh in terms of the punishment they dole out, but they're fair at the same time. So it's like that's something different than like again a Jason Voorhees who will kill pretty indiscriminately. And so it's like, well, that's kind of neat that they have there's some cause and effect and some kind of rationale behind why they do what they do, and it's like, well, that's nice. The thing that we're not talking about with Dr. Chenard, that I think is really important to establish is that he is very clearly in the mold of people that existed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, who were very much like the Western esotericists or people interested in occultism or alchemy or spiritualism, that also they could also find ways to integrate that with science. And in fact, quite a lot of the Nazi doctors that
Mengele, basically.
Mengele, but other ones in the upper echelons of the Nazi Party were very, very influenced by very specific forms of occultism and the foundations in science as it existed then. And so and also on the walls of his house, you see like Aleister Crowley, and you see the different aspects of Thelema, and you see sigils. And so he's very clearly in that mold of what was the emergence of blending these old ideas that are being resurrected into the modern day and trying to find a scientific link to connect these things. So, and that's what I think was part of what made him so interesting. Plus the fact that he, even if he wasn't doing that, he still created his own hell on earth in which he was the devil. He had control. He was, able to control who was suffering and why and what he could get out of them. And it's like, what an interesting character that was. And at first, like, I kind of thought that the photo, I thought that was him as a young man.
No.
But no, it was Pinhead when he was a human. And
let me just slide into that. When you were talking about before with the Cenobites realizing that Tiffany did not mean to open the box because she wanted to. This is one of those mini plot holes that kind of made me go, because in the first movie, Kirsty had no idea what that fucking box was. She knew that clearly it was important to Frank when he was like, no, put that down. And so she solved it. The Cenobites came, even though she didn't know what the fuck it was. She had no curiosity beyond why is this important to my uncle, and yet they were still going to take her ass.
Well, you could see it.
But Tiffany, who solves it, again, she has no idea what it is. She solves it, but somehow her innocence is more important.
Well, I would take a little bit of disagreement with that in the sense that Chrissy, if you look, before she even knows what it is, you can kind of see it in her eyes that she has that Eve holding the apple from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. She has that look in her eyes of this kind of, what is this thing? And it kind of is like this sparkle of, beyond just sheer curiosity, because Tiffany was like a pure innocent. Whereas here it's like you could kind of see that there was that look of like almost greed, or which is not even the perfect word to say it, but like you could tell that there was like almost like it was calling to her, like the promise of whatever, pleasure, untold riches or whatever, almost like a genie in a lamp, like you could tell that there was that call, that lull that was in her eyes. And so, I mean, but again, it wasn't entirely like she didn't even really know what it was, but there was that allure. And so I think that they could probably sense that, and again, they're not above reason, they're not above negotiation. So it's like, I think that, in other words, there was enough there to make them want to, have her and extract the pain and the pleasure from her, but not like.
But in the first movie, though, I feel like the filmmakers were trying to sort of hint at her not being as virtuous as you would say, because she has a boyfriend who sleeps over in her bed, but at the same time, they go to painstaking lengths where you never see her and Steve really kiss. You never see them have sex. And in fact, when he spends the night in her bed, they are fully clothed. And I'm sorry, as a woman, I'm just going to say this. She is in the kind of clothes that you wear when you did not just fuck. I'm on my period. I'm constipated. I'm cramping. I'm going to put my men's t-shirt on and my men's pants on. And the dude was sleeping next to her like, well, at least I got to sleep next to her, you know? Yeah. So, like, well, I feel like while they were very much 20...
There is a line that Pinhead says where Pinhead says something to the effect of, you know, we know you're curious about this.
Yeah, well, that's what I got.
There is, I think, something subconscious. I think on a subconscious level, there is something with Kirsty, where she's,
well, at least initially,
where she's maybe curious about.
Yeah, well, I mean, and really, you know, the best of us have that part of us that if we were given if we were given a genie lamp, you know, wouldn't our eyes kind of sparkle with thoughts of riches or thoughts of whatever, you know, even the most virtuous among us, there's still that temptation factor. I mean, and that really is what the Adam and Eve story is all about. Ultimately, is that it's this temptation even amongst the most innocent in what was then, you know, God's creation and everything. So it's, I think that, you know, there's definitely an aspect to it there. And so I would say that in defense. But the one thing I didn't mention in the last one, speaking of Adam and Eve, one thing I didn't mention in the last video that we did, but something that because it gets reiterated in the beginning of this thing. So you have Frank saying, you know, Jesus wept, and that's kind of less severe, but it's in a similar vein of like Jesus Christ as an expletive or as an exclamation or whatever. But that's a very key phrasing there, because it's specifically Jesus wept, and it's calling back in that context, is calling back to suffering, a great suffering in the Passion, that is undergone willingly and undergone for the sake of everyone else in the history of humanity other than Jesus himself, as opposed to Frank, who is doing it totally for selfish pleasure gratification. And so it's an interesting kind of callback to that, again, that perversion of this idea of, well, this selfless, virtuous suffering versus, you know, the pleasure is the pain and the pain is the pleasure. So that's just an interesting connection point. But then you move into here where you've got this hell on earth doctor who has all this power, and he's afraid of the real power that he's able to get when he goes into hell. And then once he gets it, then it's like, think that I hesitated.
Aw, dang. I wanted to say that because that was my favorite line.
Well, that's a good line. To think that I hesitated for a second or whatever. And, you know, it's
with Chenard? Oh, yeah.
But
that was a good
because Dr. Chenard, Dr. Chenard becomes a new Cenobite. We get to see, in this movie, we learn that the Cenobites used to be human, and we see Dr. Chenard become his own kind of Cenobite. And he seems to be more
at the very beginning.
He seems to be much more powerful than the other Cenobites too, because he takes them out at one point.
It's because he's connected. It's because he's connected to Leviathan. Yeah. Well, and the other ones, they still have free will,
humanity.
Well, and his memories are also fresh too. His memories are fresh,
which is why the humanity of the Cenobites is kind of what draws the Cenobites to work hand in hand with Kirsty, and with what's her name, to work against
Tiffany.
This Dr. Chenard, because now they're powerless. They're back to being human.
Dr. Chenard loves being a Cenobite, though. Like, he is 1000% excited in like each of his Cenobite scenes.
I think that's the difference between Chenard and Pinhead, formerly known as, oh God, what was his human name?
Elliot Spencer.
Elliot Spencer, is that these were not, if you look at the real, the human counterparts of the Cenobites, you could tell, like, these are not bad people. Elliot Spencer was a fucking British soldier. The chattering teeth Cenobite was a child. So it's like
I thought he was an SS officer. Yeah,
he's a British soldier, sweetheart.
Okay. Well,
that's Britain.
World War I.
I thought I saw
World
this.
War I, Dane.
I thought I saw that the skull symbol on his hat. But
you are very mistaken.
No, but no, he's well. First of all, you get the British accent. He's clearly English. He's an English officer. Again, these are people who their worst crime is probably curiosity. But Chenard, he was an honest to God bad person in his normal life. In his real life, he killed, he scammed. I mean, look at the fact that he took one of his own patients back to his house just so he could revive Julia.
It wasn't just one patient; it was several because all of them were empty by the time.
Yes.
Done. But once he got
to revive Julia, he had to kill like a dozen people to revive Julia, and he had no problem with that.
As soon as he was turned into a Cenobite, it was like then he was like Jason Statham and Crank.
Yeah. Well, actually, there was another thing I had as curiosity because, and I asked this question I think when we were watching it originally. I mean, as soon as like Pinhead he goes into the dimension, he basically becomes Pinhead. You get to see the creation of the Cenobite at the very beginning, and the one thing I never quite got. And we were trying to theorize this is Frank had been in that dimension for so long, and still was there, by the way, when they arrived in this movie. Yet he never actually became a Cenobite. Now I remember you were saying, Kim, like you felt like he never truly gave himself over, but neither did some of the others. I mean,
we don't know that though.
Yeah, we don't know that with Frank. Because again, remember if we're taking the original source material, which obviously they drew off of the characterization of Frank from the source material, Frank, his characterization, what he was looking for is the complete opposite. Like he already knew what the Cenobites were. He knew what the lament configuration was. When Frank went searching for that damn box, he knew what it would do. So when he went to solve it in the book, he laid out an offering of things to the Cenobites because he was like, oh, they're gonna bring me this, they're gonna bring me that, da da da. And so when it came, it was like, this is not what I was looking for. Like when the hot bitch is gonna come back, y'all ain't hot bitches. So he already knew what he was getting himself into to a certain degree, except for it just wasn't quite wrapped in the package that he wanted. Yeah. I'm going to go with the people like, Pinhead and his, 3 Cenobite cohorts. They were probably just people who were curious. Yeah. And then they became corrupted. Frank was someone who was probably already corrupted, but he's at the end of the day, Frank seems to be a very selfish being. The way that he manipulated Julia when he was alive, he manipulated her and then had the fucking nerve to stand next to his brother on his wedding day to the woman that he fucked just a minute ago, and then at the end where he betrays Julia and then manipulates Kirsty in the second film, thinking her father is suffering in purgatory, suffering in hell, but he manipulates her to get her to come and save him, or rather be there with him, so he has someone to fuck all the time. Yeah. All he cared about was a damn warm spot to stick his dick in. He's very selfish.
Whereas Dr. Chenard is just all about like the power and wanting the power and the knowledge, and he just loves being a Cenobite so much. Like the first thing he does is kill a bunch of his patients. I recommend amputation.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god.
Keep in mind also that Frank is being kept in his personal hell specifically because he escaped and cheated the Cenobites out of their claim.
Uh-huh.
You know, so and then meanwhile, Dr. Chenard is basically like a tourist. You know, so there's different arrangement there. You know,
Like a VIP tourist.
basically, yeah.
He gets to fuse
I
with
feel like there are
Leviathan.
levels. I feel like there's a hierarchy. Like people who
Yeah.
get to be Cenobites, and then the people who are, well, they're the ones who are face down in shit with their legs sticking out for eternity. You know?
I feel
what about
like because of the levels of his evils. I feel like because of the levels of his evils that he had in life, gave him the power and the pain that was much
Become a
more powerful
Cenobite?
than the other Cenobites. You know,
You mean Dr. Chenard?
I think
Yeah,
I can buy
Okay.
that. I think like Julia was trying to double cross him. It's like, okay, we're gonna push you into this box. I don't think she expected him to become a Cenobite.
Yeah, well, I don't think she fully understood how that all worked either. So I mean, again, she's new at that part of it as well. But I mean, she only really knows insofar as she had a hand in everything having to do with Frank coming back and all that stuff. So I mean,
Well, remember she said, like, how do you think I was allowed to come back? They wanted souls, you know, and it's like she was allowed to come back. It wasn't like to a certain degree, yes, he did quote unquote bring her back. But if we want to go by Julia's statement when she said, why do you think I was allowed to come back? You know,
Yeah.
if Leviathan, if the overarching being that controls that underworld, if that being did not allow her to come back, it doesn't matter what the fuck, Chenard did with that fucking mattress.
Yeah.
You know, she was allowed to come back because Chenard, I guess if you want to call it the overarching being of that underworld, could tell that there's someone else up there who's trying to get in contact with us. Okay, bitch, you can go back if it means that you are luring him to us.
Yeah, because that's who we really want. And
Yeah.
Oh,
well, the thing, so something that I think that you're right as far as there being a hierarchy of things in a system for it. I mean, take most either mythologies or religions or whatever that have multiple either heavenly or hellish beings, and you'll find hierarchy of angels, hierarchy of demons, all that stuff. So
well,
I could definitely
angels
buy
and
that.
devils as they by their own report.
Well, and that's kind of why I almost hesitate to say that it's hell necessarily, because again, it's largely through
It's
perception.
technically it's the labyrinth, which they make a lot of allusions to the labyrinth of the mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, they say Lord of the Labyrinth. That's what they call Leviathan.
exactly.
Exactly.
There are lots of questions when I get to that series. Like, I mean, and it includes the first movie, like the weird cricket-eating bum, the guy who basically is there, his role, who he is, that strange
More like
demon-looking
what?
thing that came out of the wall at Kirsty when she first used the box.
the worm
And
looking like thing.
yeah, then there's the whole carnival
Yeah.
that they were dealing with, and
Well,
that
apparently that animal thing was the manifestation of the engineer, the overarching being. Basically it's Leviathan, which is very fucking stupid. That was the manifestation of that.
Well, okay, so I didn't get to mention this in the last episode, and I would like to have, but I'll say it now. So that creature in and of itself that came down the hallway in the first one, in and of itself, pretty creepy looking, and I was really into that scene and the tension of it, but then I had to pause and laugh because you could totally see the cart that is pushing the thing. I was like, oh wow, they didn't catch that. You could totally see the cart that is pushing the animatronic down the hall, and it's like a hospital gurney or something.
Yeah, they didn't try to hide that shit.
Well, I mean, I get it. It was pre-CGI, but still, it was just that part made me laugh. But I mean, I think part of why these various things are there, and we're not necessarily fully made privy to all of them, is in a similar fashion to like, well, a lot of paranormal stuff from the 80s, like Ghostbusters or especially Poltergeist, where in Poltergeist you see all kinds of weird shit that is never explained, like the spider demon thing with the skull head, or the face that emerges from the portal to scare Craig T. Nelson and is never seen again, and things like that. So I mean, in other words, in this place, there are creatures and realms and beings beyond our knowledge, and so it's just, those are things that will never, again, Lovecraftian idea, things that we'll never be able to truly comprehend that exist in this world. And so I think that's part of it, and part of the terror is not really knowing what those things are or what they're for. And I think I actually, by the way, I did check a close-up photo, because the photo we saw in the movie was not all that close up, but like I saw the close-up, and you're right, he's definitely an English officer, so I apologize to all English officers of that period.
Can we just say right quick about the throwaway characters, though, that no one has mentioned? The boyfriend in the first movie, who literally is just fucking there. I don't know why he shows it in the movie. And then we've got the young, like, resident doctor. Oh God, what was his name? I've already forgotten his name.
I would say Kevin.
Kevin, Chris, whatever the fuck the guy is in the second movie.
He's Dr. Chenard's assistant.
Yeah, he's another doctor. Kyle, that's his name, Kyle.
Yeah.
And he just dies so fast.
Well, Julia tricks him, and like, I feel bad for Kyle. I feel genuinely bad for Kyle.
Yeah, because he didn't deserve that. But it was like, damn, like, were they just like, okay, we've got this other character who is obviously supposed to be like her love interest, not really, considering the fact she doesn't really know him. Oh, yeah, shit, we got to get rid of him right quick. Oh, I know. Julia can kill him.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's like the opposite of like a James Bond situation, where James Bond will go through women like underwear, and here, and they almost never endure in any real significant way. And here it's like, geez, is she ever gonna find someone that'll last through the whole movie? I don't think so.
And it's like, yeah,
her boyfriend just goes home.
The boyfriend Steve goes home. His parents take him home, and he just like, bye, Kirsty. Like, she wakes up, he's not even there. He goes, oh, we sent him home hours ago. Like, damn.
Well, it's like after all the shit that she's been through, it's like you would think that she'd want him to like stay overnight forever, And it's
well, she was unconscious, so she didn't have a choice in that matter. He just left her ass.
Well, that's awful. I mean, it's like I would be like, again, this is the kind of person I am, but like, it's like if I'm, your boyfriend or whatever, it's like I'm dedicated. It's like I'm going to be there, 24/7, because especially with all that shit that they went through, it's like, you need to be by her side. You gotta protect your lady,
Actually,
and clearly he thought the story was true because he lived through it. But he goes home to his parents. His parents take him home. He leaves her there, and like in the story in the second one, we're to believe that Kirsty's there for a couple of days.
Yeah,
and he just leaves her there like nothing.
I didn't see nothing.
Her whole family is dead. He goes home to his parents like, girlfriend? What girlfriend? Kirsty? What?
I might as well go back and suck on my mommy's tit.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe he's a big mama's boy, and they can still control him. Basically, maybe that's it. I don't know. In which case,
that one of those couples that were at the dinner party were his parents.
Yeah, well, in which case, Chrissy, you're better off without him, girl.
Kyle's a much better guy for you, but then he died.
Yeah.
Does anybody else notice that the cop in there almost seemed to be like pressing her, like, I know you killed those people?
Oh,
no, I never got that. No,
I did. I mean,
nice.
Well, here's the
He
thing,
was
like
harsh
cops,
on her.
well, of course he was. I mean, well, cops in a lot of movies, I don't know if they're necessarily this way in real life, but like in a lot of movies, whenever there's someone dead and there's like one witness, you'll always have that cop that automatically assumes that the one witness did it, even if there's no evidence for it. And it's like, that's a trope. You know? It's
This
not
is
even
a joke that Brandon makes about Law and Order SVU. Like, oh, the husband did it, the boyfriend did it. Like, that's a joke.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, man, you know, my ex, like, that was all she wanted to do by the end was to just binge SVU and not spend any time with me at all. And
babe, do not take that as a fucking sign.
well, but like the point is that like I would hear all about the show and she wouldn't spend any time with me, but like but upon hearing it in the background, like yeah, it was that it's not even good cop bad cop, but it's the cops that are automatically like, okay, you're the one witness to this crime, so you must have done it. And oftentimes they'll find out that they're right, and it's like, well, oh gee whiz, you must be psychic, you know. Yeah, it's that is kind of a trope in its own fashion, but
well, see,
yeah.
I feel like that the cop, whatever the fuck his name is, because of course we never see him again.
He only's like in the beginning, but yeah.
I feel like that cop, that his whole thing wasn't necessarily that he thought that Kirsty did it, but it was like, you know, you have a crime scene where you've got her stepmother dead on the bed with chains stuck in her. You've got, you know, a corpse that's skinless upstairs, which is her father. And then you've got another corpse that's in pieces with chains attached to it all over the, you know, the top floor. And other random shit throughout the house. The house is just trash. And you're like, what the fuck happened?
Well,
okay,
and they even kind of say that, you know, as they're investigating the crime scene.
Yeah, and all these other random dead bodies that were the men that Julia fed to Frank. You have to wonder, like, what the fuck happened? Okay, you've got the boyfriend who was probably a bit more lucid, you know, and they let him go home. But you have Kirsty, who was obviously out of her fucking mind and was probably saying all kinds of shit, like to the point where she had her eyes open, and the cop is like, "Welcome back." You know,
well,
it's like,
I wonder what side the cops are on, because obviously the doctor got state's evidence, which is the mattress.
That was such bullshit. Like, that would never. I'm sorry, but that would never happen in real life. That would never happen in real life. Like, how the fuck is that going to help that girl remember what happened? Oh yeah, by the way, I need a key piece of evidence from the crime scene delivered to my house. Not the hospital. I need you to get that bloody ass top mattress, not the box springs, but the mattress. Bring it to my house, into this very open room with no desk or nothing else in it. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, seriously, like that took me out. I was so fucking pissed.
Well, it just kind of speaks to the sort of influence like Dr. Chenard actually has. I mean, it's called the Chenard Institute. Like, he runs that thing.
Well, and as far as
he might actually have had the kind of clout to like swing something like that.
Well, and letting the boyfriend go and having Chrissy there. Well, you know, she's a woman, so obviously she's crazy. She's got hysteria, and so we got to keep her under observation. But the boyfriend, you can let it go.
Break out the vibrators.
How old are we going?
Exactly.
That's downright Freudian right there.
Exactly. Which, I mean, you know, I don't think that he's necessarily. I mean, okay, here's something that kind of freaked me out initially, and it was a great character introduction. So we have the doctor, and he's talking about brain surgery and shit. The woman has her fucking skull opened up, and I guess that she's still conscious to a certain extent because you saw her.
She is.
And it's like, is she like unbelievably doped up on painkillers right now? Because
well, remember, your brain has no pain receptors. And a lot of neurosurgery, there's some neurosurgery they need you to be awake to see how you react to it. Like if they're trying to tap into a certain, particularly if they're working with your frontal lobe, they want to make sure they don't fuck something, that they don't fuck with your speech centers and stuff like that. So obviously Chenard is a psychiatrist, but he's also obviously a neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
The fact that he's got this woman's brain open and which here's the fucked up part about this is that I never understood what the fuck is he doing. This was not this was like some like medieval version of a lobotomy
surgery.
Yeah, because it wasn't like he was fixing a blood clot or no shit like that. He took a goddamn bone saw, like a miniature version of a bone saw, and just sawed into this woman's fucking brain.
Oh, you can see the smoke coming off.
I know, like there was nothing medicinal going on with what he was doing to her.
Yeah,
did it even look like he put her under or anything?
No,
she wasn't under at all. I'm sure she probably wasn't feeling any real pain, but
well, not that it would have bothered him if she did.
I will say this: I used to do extensive study back into the. It was a fascination point for myself back in college when I was studying originally. I learned a lot about psychiatric history and stuff like that. Now, in the late 80s, it's highly unlikely they would have that level of control. But back in the 60s and even early 70s, the chief psychiatrist was literally in full control over the asylum. And they used to do lots of really unethical experiments.
Well,
the creator of the lobotomy did so just like that.
Well, babe, think about it like this. This film takes place where we're led to believe that this film takes place probably in the UK. It is a British film.
Yeah.
We got Julia has an English accent. So many other people around them have English accents. Chenard has an English accent.
The UK or Brooklyn?
Well, they did mention Brooklyn. So.
Yeah, I mean, I could buy either. I mean, Clive Barker's British, and it was a British film. The first one, for sure, and the second one. But like, I could buy either.
I'm pretty sure the third one takes place in New York, which is at least close enough to the Chenard Institute. LA?
Either way. I felt like it was LA.
It could have been. I got a New York vibe, but
they definitely with these movies, they definitely like
fudge it.
Yeah, you can't tell where the location is. Like the whole idea is that it can be anywhere. You know.
Yeah.
Well, and keep in mind, especially like, in decades past, I don't know necessarily now, but like in ye olden days, like early 20th century, you would have a lot of boat and plane traffic that would go between New York City and London. And that's why they developed, for film and television, that's why they developed the transatlantic accent, because it was like a fusion of American and English into this really phony accent that nobody had naturally. And it kind of died out on its own because it wasn't.
Not necessarily. You still have that New England accent. You got some New Englanders.
Well, but that's different than the transatlantic accent, though.
That's the same thing.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's like the accent that you have if you're from like Massachusetts or something isn't the same as the transatlantic accent, and it was specifically created for film and television as opposed to like. Boston especially is like really thick, but Massachusetts accent's different than New York, different from all these other places, and those did generate organically, and they did they're maintained today. But my point being is that this kind of struck me as like, well, it could be either New England or London. Either way, you would have people that would probably have had enough travel between the two to where you could buy that there would be Americans there or British people there. I could buy either one.
Yeah, I will say that it doesn't really matter in a lot of ways. I do feel like it's more along the lines of I still feel like they took some liberties with how much control he had, and I will say that the majority of the rights and stuff that people get from mental health, didn't really. I mean, HIPAA wasn't even a law until the 90s.
Which is just crazy to think about.
But things like that. A lot of these things. There are reasons why these laws exist. I mean, ethics standards, the things that they would do to people. I mean, as the lobotomy is a good example. The guy who tested the lobotomy, 99% of his subjects died, but the one subject that lived seemed to be calmer. These are chimpanzees at the time. So obviously, that means that the procedure is perfectly good.
Well, it's the same thing with electroconvulsive therapy and insulin therapy. I mean, oh God, who was the economist that A Beautiful Mind was based off of?
Ugh.
Yeah, they would do insulin shock therapy with him to treat his schizophrenia. I remember come on, babe, we've talked about this before. As recently as 2007, I had a psychiatrist who recommended electroshock therapy to treat my depression. And I was like,
ECT still is
No.
you want me to fry my brain to treat my depression? She's like, it's the best thing. I'm like, okay, no, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am fucking done. I may be depressed. I ain't crazy.
In
defense of ECT is the last resort.
I have
but
something
it's not like
that.
it is in the movies.
The doctor is a character in that game I play, in that horror game I play, and a lot of his look is based off of Cenobites, and his main power is electroconvulsive therapy. He was like a very unethical doctor, to put it very mildly.
But you see, actually, in a brief flashback of Tiffany, you see where she was clearly subjected to ECT, and I'm guessing that was not to treat anything, but more to tap into those hidden parts of her brain that Chenard wanted, which he's a piece of shit because, again, he was this. I feel like of all the characters besides the whole Kyle character who was just like there, but Tiffany is probably the most sympathetic because, her mom was murdered. She was basically kidnapped by this doctor. No one even knows her real name. The nurses just name her Tiffany, and she's in this hospital where she's experimented upon by Chenard, all because he wants to use her to solve the lament configuration.
Well, and people are shocked to hear her speak too.
Yeah.
Well, when she gets to talk, it's kind of a good moment because it's the reveal of Chenard in his full Cenobite glory, and she's just like, "Oh shit!"
Exactly.
Yeah, and he was probably already a monster to her, but now he's even more monstrous.
He's like, "Come here, I'm your doctor."
Well,
like, oh my God, get away!
Well, that moment in particular is what made me think of Silent Hill, because you got especially in this film, not so much in the first one, but in this film particularly, you got people in their own personal hells that are indicative of the life that they lived, when they were alive, which is redundant to say, but it's indicative of their lives, and in one way or another. And with Doctor, he was a malicious force, and so he becomes even more so of a malicious force when he's a Cenobite. And you have quite a lot of monsters in Silent Hill that they're basically twisted versions of what they were, or what they were to the person who's perceiving them. And so that's a very common element there. The interesting thing with him, I think, is just, again, how much he has control over his situation, because, again, he's plugged into Leviathan, but also, in a way, it's like he's kind of the Satan of his ward in the living world, but then here he kind of becomes his own Satan in a more literal sense, even to the point of controlling and defeating the other Cenobites, and kind of getting them in line. And I think part of it is that he, again, because he's so recent, his memories are still in effect, and he hasn't, lost them. And so he's using those to his advantage on top of being a sadist,
They do make a point in one of the commentaries of pointing out that remembering that they were human weakens the other Cenobites.
Yeah, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. That makes sense.
And quite frankly, because Chenard was already so fucking evil to begin with, it doesn't matter if he can remember his human self. Because again, going back to that line, and to think I hesitated, he doesn't care.
Nah.
He sees his Cenobite self as his so-called final form, as the greater version of himself. Because like you look at his little, like, I hate those little snake fingers that come out of his hands. You see like anything that he can dream up. Surgical scalpels, anything that like
flowers,
fingers.
fingers.
Everything that comes out of those snake, those like fucking
Tendrils.
worms or whatever you want, tendrils, to the point where his fucking scalpel is stronger than the other Cenobites' chains. He sees himself as a god. So quite frankly, like you said, he does enjoy being a Cenobite much more than the other ones. The other ones, especially Pinhead, I see it. I think he sees it more as it's his job. Like, okay, I punch in and out. It's my job. It's my duty. I'm enjoying making you suffer. Yeah, I enjoy making you suffer, but whatever. But with Chenard, he's like, fucking, I'm here. Like he hadn't even done anything yet. He was just like,
oh, good, a fight.
Yeah, he had just gotten transformed, and he was like, and to think, I hesitated. I'm like, oh God, you're already enjoying this, and you haven't done nothing yet. Well, so like Chenard, he was so fucking evil in his real life. It doesn't matter if he can remember what he was like being human or not, because to be honest, he was never fucking human. He was always a monster.
Well, he took to it like
I love his delivery of that line too.
He almost
whispers it. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, all pretense gone for humanity. I agree with you, Dustin. I think that was a great line for that.
And to think, I hesitated.
Again, he was never fucking human to begin with. He was always evil. Like with Elliot Spencer, with the little kid, with the woman, with the fat guy, you could sit there and say they were probably human and they were probably decent people, but Chenard, he had no problem with killing his own patients. His own hospital was used as basically a front for what he ultimately wanted, which was, this other world.
Yeah, and the esoteric knowledge and the power within. And it's what I was saying before is he kind of took to it like a duck to water because he kind of was already there. He was able to fully realize his twisted visions and
Exactly.
which I remember feeling pretty bad for the Cenobites when you see their human forms and you see the chattering teeth one and he's just a kid and I'm like, what did he do that was so wrong, And I guess it was because they're curious or whatever, but I do like the fact that even despite them being agents of suffering and, all that stuff, I like that they do seem to have a sense of duty or a sense of what is just or fair, or that's why I like the fact they can be negotiated with. And, it's just, I think that's an interesting dimension. And, I guess you could call it sort of like when you make a deal with the devil, except that in that case, the devil usually reneges on his promise or usually tries to find some loophole to get what he wants. And here, it seems like they're more in the business of doing fair dealings and not having people squelch on a deal. And again, they can be talked into doing something else, and it's like, well, that gives them more dimension, and that's where the demons to some and angels to others, that's where that comes in. So you can't put them in a convenient box like that, which is, even though I guess you kind of can because they're in a puzzle box, but it's which that was a little weird in the first one. So it's almost like putting the genie back in the lamp, except here it's like, well, I guess that's just to summon them or to make them go away rather than to like contain them. Is that right?
Yes.
And with the Cenobites, as far as I've always looked at the Cenobites we see with Pinhead and other people, at least in the first two movies. I look at it as curiosity killed the cat, and that what they're being punished for is their curiosity. Now, with Elliot Spencer, because he's the only Cenobite that we get to see a backstory with, after the first movie, we see the fact that he was a soldier, probably more like actually probably an officer. And that he was. Fuck this. I'm over this shit. I want something more out of life. I'm feeling unfulfilled. So you can sit there and say that, okay, well,
especially after starting World War One.
Exactly. You can sit there and say that maybe he's being punished more than anything else, but we don't know what the woman, the big guy, or the kid did for them to be quote unquote punished beyond their curiosity. And as far as the child, that's the only thing I can imagine, that his curiosity got the better of him. I don't want to believe that he was like super evil,
And in Hellraiser 3, the plot centers around the Pinhead persona has been separated from Elliot Spencer and is kind of loose in the world. And they spend a lot of time with Spencer kind of giving more of his backstory and like fleshing that out. And there was a line, this was in the comic. I don't remember if it was actually in the movie. I read the comic adaptation too. But there was a line where it was like, after the Great War, many of us stopped believing in God and were just looking for anything. And I found the box.
Well, and that's very accurate, actually, to what happened to, the countries that fought in World War One, especially Britain. Because we had the Roaring Twenties, and we had the emergence of jazz and stuff, and then ultimately culminated.
So did they.
Well, but that's what I mean. Like, so we had it like that, but the British, they had it so much worse because they lost a lot more people than we did, and it affected them a lot more heavily than it did even for us. And
as a side story, the reason why it affected them is because they lost a lot of the sons of the aristocracy.
Well, yeah.
Because they all, when the older generations, they sent these boys into war thinking that they're going to be back home in a month, because Britain was so used to winning. So they sent their sons, like Elliot Spencer, into war thinking that they'd be great warriors, that they'd come home as heroes, and instead they either came home broken or not at all. And so you had a lot of these great estates, these titled families who lost everything because their eldest sons died. So that's why that war, above any other ones, was such a big deal for Great Britain. So, which makes sense that Elliot Spencer would be a World War I officer.
Oh yeah.
He's likely the eldest son of an aristocratic family, and given his the way he carries himself, even his accent, you would likely believe that he probably is the eldest son of some wealthy family. And he has this life.
He has very straight posture, even when he's in his Cenobite uniform, and a sense of duty and
exactly
a proper way of speaking and conducting himself, and that definitely carries over.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked much about Julia, have we?
Well, Julia, Julia, or even what Chrissy does, because I mean, everything I was saying with what her resourcefulness and her courage in the first one, that carries over here quite a lot more, particularly as it affects Julia, because she is elevated much more to that classical wicked stepmother / evil queen archetype.
Well, at this point, she's fucking pissed at Julia because Julia,
Julia killed her father.
Exactly. In the first movie, up until the point where her and Frank killed Larry. You can say that, okay, Julia's an evil bitch. She's terrible for cheating on Larry. She's terrible for the people that she had a hand in killing to bring Frank back. But again, she was still pretty terrible, but it was when she killed Larry that it crossed the threshold for Kirsty. When she just thought that Julia was cheating on her dad, she's like, "Oh, this evil bitch." When she realized that no, she has killed my father. Like, fuck that bitch. And when you get to the second movie, even though Julia technically is dead, she's brought back, she still hates her because of Julia and Frank. Kirsty has lost her father, and she will never get him back. And, there's not a whole lot that can be said about Julia because not only has she not really redeemed herself from the first movie, she has actually gotten worse.
Oh, much worse.
She did get over Frank.
He betrayed her. Hello.
Well, part of it...
That doesn't mean anything.
Oh, come on. Julia's a smart woman.
Well, think about that. Many women many people who are in those relationships that are abusive, they get stabbed in the back, they get hurt, but they always come back.
The difference is that Julia has been tainted by the underworld. She was already fucking evil to begin with, but now she has spent a little bit of time in the underworld. She's become corrupted even more so. And she sees Frank for what he is, because for Julia, she's clearly loyal to Leviathan. Frank never was. Because Leviathan has allowed her to come back. She can come and go as she fucking pleases as long as she does Leviathan's bidding. Frank wants out. He never wanted to stay. And now he's trapped in that space. And Julia's like, you know what? Fuck you.
Well, and that's a big point of difference between Julia.
Frank did kill her, so Julia is not going to be.
Yeah, I don't blame her for being mad at him.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, she's different in this film in the sense that now, even though she is doing the bidding of someone else or something else, she does, for the first time, have real power, and it executes it, with relish, and so that is a major point of difference, and so she is much more of a threat rather than a human who's just messing with things she shouldn't mess with, and and that's also kind of what makes Chrissy's her resourcefulness. That's part of what makes it so kind of turnabout is fair play when she wears her skin to fool the doctor, and it's like. Because I kind of thought to myself, I was like, well, we know that taking of skin and all of that's a thing because that's what happened with her father and Frank. And it's like, well, turnabout's fair play there. And it's like, well, she again has a lot of courage because that must not be pleasant.
Yeah. Julia gets sucked into a vortex and loses her skin.
Which again, that's like, oh dear, my skin came off. Oh no, I better better take it to a tailor, and, it's like, oh darn, don't you hate it when that happens? And it's that's the interesting thing, I think, is that it's not just having a physical body, it's specifically skin and how that kind of. It's sort of like a disguise in some ways, but it's also the sign of legitimacy, but it's also the currency in this particular, underworld or alternate dimension or whatever. It is sort of a currency in the sense that, if you've got it and it's intact, then you are this whole person or this powerful being. But, it's the thing that...
Well, you look at the Cenobites and the fact that Cenobites are so extremely modified with the piercings and the weirdness about them. For the humans, people who are freshly brought in, the easiest way to differentiate them is just to fucking skin them. I mean, you look at the third film, they follow that same damn pattern where the character JP, the chick that he's having sex with, that when he activates the sculpture with Pinhead stuck into it, the girl gets skinned like immediately. Like, I don't know what it is with Clive Barker and skinning, but damn,
that was
I would not want to be caught in his sex dungeon.
Too.
I think it's
his like student short films.
Okay,
Actually, it's kind of worth commenting on. in The Forbidden, they have the ending of it is they're showing what looks like somebody being skinned, and it's very convincing to the point where it like really grossed people out. What they do is it was shot in black and white with like a reverse negative, and they literally just like painted different layers on somebody. Like it was like a $12 effect. They just painted different they just painted different like body layers on somebody and then put like saran wrap on and then like pretended to like carefully cut it away so it looked like they were skinning him. It was pretty wild.
Well,
And that's always
Clive
been
Barker has a thing for.
It's always been his thing. Like,
That's
skinning.
pretty
always.
effective. Well, I think part of it is that, well, you've got the flaying of the flesh as the source of pleasure and pain and all that stuff, so that's like a big deal. But it's also, well, it's the kind of the clothes you wear, shall we say, of your being, rather than literal clothes. But it's like it's the thing that kind of holds you together, and it's what you present to the world or to this other world. And in the case of the Cenobites, like they were human, but they're not. They're this other thing. They're this other entity, and so they don't have what they once had, and they have this they've kind of embraced this mutilation as a form of pleasure and its own kind of status, which in a way I guess you could almost say, like, if you want to look at it this way, almost like a lot of what was at the time, what constituted gay fashion versus like being in the closet, and how you could, well, you know what I mean, like you could wear a nice suit and everything and look all proper, or you could like go all out. And I think in their case, it's like, well, they're going all out. And
Well, I think also like with the film, with these films, with at least in the 80s, with the whole leather. I mean, even like the Cenobites, they're wearing like leather, like everything they're wearing is like decked out black, shiny leather and stuff. It makes me think of the second Nightmare on Elm Street film, where the gym teacher is this asshole sadist, and then it turns out that he's a closeted gay guy who goes to these like S&M clubs with, that is such a stereotype,
well, but it was
that
was
gay
a
people
thing.
back then, that was the fringe element, that gay people, wore gimp outfits and they went to bathhouses and they liked spanking and shit like that. That was such a stereotype. And I feel like part of that is played out in Hellraiser.
It was a stereotype, but it also, that is what
very
happened.
offensive stereotype.
Yeah, but it also did happen quite a lot, with like, I mean, Jeffrey Dahmer, where he went to the bathhouses of Milwaukee to find some of his early victims, and that's because there were all kinds of because being gay did get like decriminalized in the 70s for a lot of the country, not all of it, but like
you mean?
Or well, no, well, there were, or rather, let me rephrase. I think I'm thinking I'm confusing things. So there was pornography that was decriminalized around that time, but the act of sodomy and by extension gayness itself was as recent as I think it was Lawrence versus Texas or something in 2003. But anyway, the point is that it's a stereotype and we look at it that way, but at the same time, like, being gay was still very much an underground thing, even if it was like in Hollywood or whatever. It was an open secret in a lot of ways, but it was still seen as a taboo even there, and let alone.
But I'm talking about the most extreme elements of it, though. The most extreme elements, because because homosexuality was something that was considered taboo back then. They would equate the homosexuality with the extremism. And the extremism being this stuff that, okay, so take two straight people, and what's the most extreme thing for straight people? Dildos up the ass, gimp costumes, ball gag, and shit like that. Choking. That's extreme. So let's go ahead and equate that with homosexuals. Boom.
Yeah, well, it was convenient. It was
fucked up and offensive.
It was convenient because they were already seen as deviant or whatever. So you just take these fringe elements of them and you throw them together, and it's like you got it. And it's not representative or whatever, but you know, it of the whole or the historical entirety of homosexuals, obviously. But it's like the point is like there was enough of it to makes an association of some kind, but it was not gonna. I mean, there's a reason why Cruising, you know, the William Friedkin film, like why that had a backlash because it was perceived to be homophobic, you know, with the leather bar and things like that, you know, and so I mean, but again, it's like that those things did exist, but it's like it's not representative then or even now, but. I will say that, you know, for sure there was a side of gay culture, from what I understand. There was a side of it that was like there's a reason why like the John Waters of the world, why the whole idea there was to be as outrageous as possible. But then like once certain states started legalizing gay marriage, like I think Massachusetts was the first one, you know, then it was because I saw a documentary about it was Outfoxed, that documentary, and they were saying how they weren't able to show a lot of the footage that they used to like to show with the gay pride parades that would have, you know, assless chaps and would have all the extreme outfits. But then when people were actually going to get married, then it was like, well, they're just very normal looking people. So part of it was, I think, that there was a subset of the culture at the time that if you were out, then you were like, you were out there, man, like really out there, and out and about and everything. But then, of course, then once these strides got made, then it was like, oh, well, these more conventional ones, they've been here all along. They just
That reminds me. That reminds me of a meme I saw a while ago. Ivan Ooze, bisexual icon.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it, you know. But I mean, my point being that yeah, it looks, you know, pretty inaccurate to us today, and it most certainly was at the time. It's just more so that I do think there was a shift in not only larger American culture, but certainly within even what was the visible, you know, gay subculture, that there was a more of a need to push the envelope in the public sphere than there even necessarily is now, because it is more accepted, you know. So I would agree with that, but I'd also say that there was more of a, you know, we can be really outrageous, that there was an element of it at that time.
Okay. I think we should probably start wrapping up, by the way.
Mhm.
So
I think
we've
so.
covered. Let's see. Going down our list here, I think we've covered the plot and the characters pretty adequately. So in terms of special effects, this movie has pretty top tier special effects. I think a few things that don't really hold up for me are some of the close-ups of like the hooks going into skin. Like they look a little too phony. You know what I mean?
They looked like they were recycled from the last movie. Some of them,
Yeah.
They may have been.
like the shots, I mean.
Well, I think some of them actually, I think they were definitely recycled shots, but the new effects that they do for the hooks into the skin aren't exactly winners either in my opinion. But pretty much everything else looks great. Like especially like the design of the Chenard Cenobite. Like I know I keep going back to Dr. Chenard, but he's just so cool. Like
Yeah, he's a really captivating character. And well, but I do agree with you. I think the effects are as good and in many respects better than the last film overall. And I didn't see any obvious mistakes like with you know, any monsters that are on gurneys or anything like that. I didn't see anything like that. But yeah, I think the makeup, like the things that really stick out to me about the film are the Cenobites themselves are so interesting looking, and so like they look so like in control of themselves, and like they don't necessarily hurt all the time, or if they do then they don't mind it. But it's like that, like I know that with Frank coming back to life gradually, that the more skin he gets, then the more he's able to feel pain again, because well, he doesn't have all his skin, so he's gonna hurt, you know. And so it's like I assume with them that if they're hurting, then they probably don't mind it anymore. But with the doctor, you can tell that he does have his moments of pain, but also that
it's a very painful process to become a Cenobite.
Very clearly, but also that he's willing to do what it takes to become this powerful being. So it's an interesting blend there. But yeah, the makeup for these creatures, like, I'm always blown away by the originality, but also just the grotesquerie and how, again, I'm not usually freaked out by gore, but I think the big thing with these films is that it's not just the physical flaying of the flesh, but what it means for them on a larger spiritual level, that it's their souls being torn apart and deformed and mutilated and all that stuff. And the fact that you get to physically see these skinless humans and body parts strewn about everywhere, and you get to see it for like long shots, and you're like, wow, with Saw, it's like, yeah, those are gruesome, but it's like those are only for like a few seconds max. And here it's like these are like sustained shots, and it's like these whole beings that are just walking bags of guts.
Does anybody else have anything on effects?
I mean, other than the makeup and costume design, which is always there, I actually liked some of the creativity and effect design in the first film a little bit more. And the reason for it is I could definitely tell the effort. They had to double their effort because they had half the budget. So to me, I always look at that and I say, I actually considered the effects on the first film better just from some of the stuff, the stop motion. So they didn't have to try and use some of the cheaper CG that they had to use in the second film. So I do feel like more effort was made in the first one than the second one, but necessity,
No. Yeah.
I didn't really like the effects in the second one. I felt like they were better in the first one, mainly because they had a smaller budget to work with, and they seemed to try. They say what again?
They were a lot less ambitious, I think, in the first one too. Like, Dr. Chenard was a really complicated design with a lot of moving parts.
It was, and at some point, say what?
The labyrinth.
I mean, that adds to the scope pretty readily.
It was just a matte painting, so that wasn't too bad. It was convincing. It was a convincing matte painting.
If I recall correctly, like years ago, I had read at some point that the filmmakers, the actor who played Chenard, they had a falling out at some point, so that presented filming issues at some point, allegedly.
I don't remember hearing anything about that.
I know
he was on the commentary for the disc.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's been like 30 plus years since they filmed it. But I'm just saying, like several years ago, I heard there was drama, and then I heard there was also drama between the filmmakers and Andrew Robinson, who played Larry in the first one. So who knows?
Which that reminds me of something I forgot about the first one. Did you notice Frank seemed like all of his dialogue was overdubbed?
It was dubbed.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's not the actor's voice.
Well, his voice was way too menacing to come out of that body.
I know. I mean, I if it were better done, I'd believe it. But yeah, that was definitely not that guy's voice.
No, not at all.
They did say that was dubbed. I forget who the voice actor was, but it was definitely not Sean, what's the actor's name? It definitely wasn't his voice, basically.
Yeah, it didn't look like it at all.
Speaking of sound, just kind of touching back on the music slightly. So, great opening theme. Apparently you can fall asleep to it.
It definitely is on par with the first one. I mean, they go together.
It's like a big budget, like booming operatic theme, and
Well,
I don't know how you can fall asleep to it.
It's kind of similar in a way. It's kind of similar to actually the Fly score that Howard Shore did, which also
I'd agree with that. They actually do sound kind of similar.
they borrowed well, the Fly for sure, but I imagine Hellraiser.
I watch those movies the other week, and I agree with you on that.
Well, the Howard Shore and David Cronenberg both, they specifically lifted the visual cues, but also the music very directly from opera, and I imagine that there was quite a lot of operaticness with this score as well for both the first two films.
Anybody else on music?
I've already said what I gotta say about the music. I liked it.
We already nailed it? All right,
Yeah.
great. Well, let's move on to favorites. I'm going to start with my favorite, which is Dr. Chenard becoming a Cenobite, because that whole scene is just awesome. And especially the way it ends. You know, that line that we just can't stop saying, to think I hesitated.
Well, it's
is
a good one.
I'm currently doing gym training again, and I'm kind of using that to spurn myself on. You know, just thinking of what it'll be like in 3 weeks when I'm done. Because the biggest challenge is getting in and out the door of the gym.
Yeah,
and it'll be like that. You know, to think I hesitated. You know, when I've dropped 10 pounds.
I'm trying to think, because I mean, everything having to do with him is great, and we know that. But like, I love it when the Cenobites get introduced. In the first one to Christie, but we kind of already see at least Pinhead in the first one before we even know exactly what he is or anything. So in a way, it's like, well, the build up or whatever is not as good as
he's recognizable as Pinhead as a human.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you get a little bit in his backstory there, but like what I mean is like, by the time once the Cenobites formally appear in here, there's been enough build up to where when they appear, it's like a big deal, and then you see Pinhead's silhouette, and he comes into the light from the darkness, and I was like, well, that's how they should have done it in the first one, where there's a lot of mystery and build up, because they kind of play their trump card a little early with the first one, but like I felt like that's how you introduce them, because that's just that adds a whole mystery and majesty to it, and and again, then they slap you with something to defy your expectations, which is that they don't really have any interest in Tiffany, So again, that's a good twist on it right after you get this awesome introduction,
All right. Well, my favorite scene is an odd one, because I actually like the weird carnival scene that they throw in there. And the reason for it is that the world that they enter into is much more complex than just the maze, and that kind of shows it. That maybe there's a lot more depth that we haven't explored yet. I'm still kind of curious as to how that fits in the whole, and I like that. That gives me more of an interest as to where they are.
And for all we know, it could very much be subjectively generated, much like how Silent Hill as a town tends to look different for each person that's there. So yeah, for all we know, this world could just change according to who's in it.
Kim, what is your favorite scene in this film?
Oh man, I'm gonna say the scene that probably grossed me out the most, and for some reason, it's my favorite scene, because you can kind of see that. It's a scene where Chenard brings the patient in the straitjacket, and he hands him a scalpel. Like in that moment, you can see that Chenard is completely soulless, that he is devoid of any empathy or caring, and that this guy is definitely not a real. He's a doctor, but only a name. Like he doesn't care about his patients. He only cares about his own selfish aspect. When he just lets the guy mutilate himself in the effort of, bringing back Julia, and then later on you see him interacting with Julia, where like he's gone through these great lengths to bring her back, and then when he does, he's almost in a way disgusted by her, and in a way, revolted, because like he walks through his house, and she's left a bloody handprint on his wall. She smashes his mirror when she sees what she looks like, and then later on, like she gets herself in one of his suits, and of course she picks the all white one, and he's like, "Oh yeah, sure, you look great," clearly lying to her, because when she takes his cigarette from him and she leaves a little trail of blood on his fingers, he wipes it away, like. Even though later on he gets into the whole thing, but there's still that part of him that is disturbed, that is like, ew. But
I'm looking at the whole thing, and I'm like, I got this walking pile of guts in my sterile white house, that and that's a great touch. The fact that his house looks so sterile, and
it looks like a goddamn operating room almost.
Yeah, well,
very
like,
80s.
She's just this walking tub of guts and blood, and she's like kissing her, and I'm like,
yeah.
Like, put some skin on before you touch me with that shit. Just that and the mutilation, like you said, that grossed me out.
My favorite part in here would probably be where Kirsty wears the skin of her stepmother.
That's good stuff.
That's some good creepy stuff, because you don't expect her to be wearing the shit, and then she pulls it off and you see all the blood on her, and it's like, ew. But the fact that she saves what's her name's life is kind of priceless. So.
Well, it helps her save Tiffany because she's able to distract Chenard long enough for Tiffany to grab the puzzle box and solve it, which sucks Leviathan back into its own corner of the labyrinth, killing Dr. Chenard because they're still attached, and it rips his head right off.
Well, and it shows her courage too, because it's like, I can't think of many characters that would do such a thing, but she doesn't hesitate, and it's like, well, that says a lot about her,
So, anyone else?
I think we got everybody.
Okay, then let's do our outros. Then, Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, I'm Kim from Kim Creates Stuff. I'm going to change that name soon. But I actually am, it's my YouTube channel, and I am planning a new series where I discuss books that were made into movies, or just books. Still trying to decide that, while I'm doing my makeup. So getting the girls and the guys, in that whole thing.
All righty. Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
I am Dane Kyle, aka Dane Damarung on YouTube. I'm on a channel called Indie Horror Film Creative, where I do unboxings and some film reviews and things. And I'm trying to get my organs organized again when it comes to I had a really good job interview today, and I think I've got a really good chance of hopefully getting an offer tomorrow. I really, really hope so. But point being that, the show will go on regardless. And I'll be set to move pretty soon. So once all of those kind of outstanding things, once they've been settled, then I'll be able to get into a more regular rhythm of unboxing like usual and building the collection up and all that stuff. I just finished uploading all my pictures to my newly revamped Instagram, so people can go there. It's Dane Damarung on Instagram. You can find the collection there and look at each individual title if you wish in more detail. And I'm also the producer of a film called Acts 2 Grind, which has its Indiegogo going on right now. So go ahead and look for that. And, that's just a few things I'm up to, but I'm getting back into the swing of things.
Okay. Dustin, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am a horror collector living here in Milwaukee. I show off the stuff that I find on my YouTube channel, The Crypt of Horrors. And that's also the name of my Instagram, where I do pretty much the same thing, just a lot less frequently. The Crypt of Horrors. I recently unboxed the Scarlet box with the Hellraiser series, with Hellraiser 1, 2, and 3 in it. And that video should be going live relatively soon, either tonight or tomorrow. So go to my channel and check that out.
Okay. Going over to Septim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm Septum Sen of Septum Sen versus the World. Of course, we like physical media where we are, and we talk about all the various loves and enjoyment or physical media, including what's coming out, pickup videos, reviews, and various other things. One of the other things, though, that I do is I work with Inside Movies Galore and helping to coordinate the schedule. Of course, we had this as sort of a little segue to our next month as we go from superhero summer to kaiju combat. And for those of you who are our big rubber-suited lizard fans out there, we have 2 Godzilla films. Actually, I should say 2 takes of the same Godzilla film, as we look at the original Godzilla King of the Monsters, 1956, I believe, and the very original, the one that started it all as our main event and highest voted, Gojira, the 1954 film. It's going to be a hoot, and I'm sure we can all get some enjoyment.
We saw people that enjoy rubber suits in these films, but these are rubber suit lizards. So got something else going on for you.
And my name is David Strege. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on our journey of discovering film and watching films that we have not seen in years to go on, enjoy with each other. Make sure that if you find a puzzle box, you stay away from it at all times, because all the happiness in the world is right exactly with you at all times, I think.
Do what Hulk Hogan said and say your prayers and take your vitamins. Just don't be a racist.
I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, and lately I've been watching the Alfred Hitchcock films, so check out some of those reviews, and so on and so forth. So like, share, and subscribe, and definitely check out our next film discussion as we dive into China's biggest secrets.
Japan. But yes.
And close-ups on screen. So, in any case, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Enjoy. Good night, all.